All right, so I am reading this book. It is called The External Control of Organizations, a Resource Dependence Perspective. It's over at Stanford Business Classics by Jeffrey Pfeffer and Gerald Salasic. I think that's how you pronounce it. So anyway, this gets to the resource dependency theory. And there's a quote in the book that I read just this morning. Information control, then, is an important mechanism for both the exercise and the avoidance of influence. And it was fascinating to see how organizations and individuals will either share information or not share information to and maintain some type of ambiguity in order to control and influence a situation. And that way, they can also manage, by doing that, managing the information and managing the influence, they're also managing the dependence. And I find this really fascinating because this kind of gets to what I'm going to be talking to people about regarding buyers and sellers. So we all like to think that, oh, well, companies put their information online and the selling company is going to put something that's kind of the truth, but maybe they don't. Right. And this is where you can start to see where there's a lot of tension and an asymmetrical relationship between a buyer and a seller. Because honestly, like they're both testing each other out to see how this dependence is going to work in their relationship. Right. We all like to think that companies are honest. Not really. Right. This is why we have reviews. This is why people will write a review on a site. Sometimes it's a third party review, or we have analyst firms, especially in the technology space. Sure, sometimes we'll say that, it's pay to play, but at the same time, that's why you have a firm, a third party, right? Some type of third party to either give awards, to analyze the products, right? Or give some sort of analysis or judgment or some sort of review. So it's really interesting to read that because it kind of gets to how do you trust information that you're given or you receive. And this can even be true for the buyer, right? Because we like to think that we're buying from someone who's pretty legit, but maybe not, right? So I'm not quite sure, like when we like to think that all this information is available online and everyone is getting all this information and da 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 da. But at the same time, we still are in this buyer beware situation. And this kind of reminds me of when I bought my condo. And I ended up writing this really long piece on Medium. That's kind of like a guide for someone if they're going to go buy a home and what to ask and what to think about. And it's everything I learned from the whole experience. And what I learned from that was this whole buyer beware. And I find it kind of shocking because for cars, we have like lemon laws, but for homes, we don't really have lemon laws. Like we kind of do what we kind of don't. So I think this is kind of true as well when you're in a situation where, let's say, you're a customer buying team and you're working with a seller salesperson and you have this as I've mentioned before, right, this kind of dynamic that's going on, right? That's dependence, right? So the seller, the supplier is going to depend on the revenue from the buyer, and the buyer is going to depend on this product, this solution from the seller that's going to work and help them and be like their magic wand, so to speak. So you have this dependence, and if something changes with the product, or let's say the product isn't supported anymore, it gets end of lifed, or let's say it is just retired, right? There's some implications to this, and what does it mean, and what does support mean, and what does support look like, and what does implementation mean, and what does implementation look like, and how dependent are you on this supplier if you're a buyer? And then this kind of gets to the same perspective from the seller's perspective, right? How much of their business is this company? And this kind of gets to diversification of how many, why it looks really good when you are buying a solution that you are not the only one, right? You are not the only customer of this seller, right? Of the supplier. You want to be like one of many, right? Because if a supplier has many, many customers, right? Many, many buyers, well, that kind of changes the dependency and the dynamic. So it's really something to think about in how this all works. I just find the resource dependency theory to be fascinating and quite true. And believe it or not, it came out around, I think, the 70s, 80s, I think, maybe the 80s, maybe 90s. But it's been around for a while. And it's a great read. So if you get a chance, again, the book title is The External Control of Organizations, a Resource Dependence Perspective. Thank you so much and enjoy.